On June 12, 2026, Elon Musk's company SpaceX, a rocket-building company, went public and raised more money in a single day than any company in the history of financial markets. Elon Musk also became the world's first trillionaire in history. SpaceX's founding documents clearly state its purpose: to make humanity a multi-planetary species. And when it went public, it raised $75 billion in a single day. And almost nobody talked about what Elon Musk would do with this money for Mars. This is not just an important topic for investors. It is important for all of humanity. What will a company with projects like sending humans to Mars do with $75 billion? And it changes almost everything about how we should be thinking about space exploration over the next 20 years. Let's start with what most people get wrong about SpaceX and money. There is a version of this story where SpaceX is a rocket company that happened to go public. That is wrong. SpaceX is, at its core, a Mars transportation project that has spent the last 20 years building the financial infrastructure to fund itself. Every Falcon 9 launch, every Starlink satellite, every government contract, all of it has been pointing toward the same destination. The problem was never really vision. The problem was always capital. Developing the technology to land humans on another planet and keep them alive requires more money than any private company had ever been able to raise before, until now. To understand what $75 billion actually means, you need to understand what it costs to build a Mars program from scratch. The Saturn V rocket that carried astronauts to the moon cost approximately $185 billion in today's dollars to develop. And that was just the rocket. It did not include the training infrastructure, the life support systems, the ground control networks, or anything resembling a plan for humans to actually survive on another world once they arrived. The Apollo program, in total, reached a cost of close to $280 billion in modern terms. And it put 12 people on the moon for a few days each before the program was canceled entirely. Mars is not the moon. Mars is, even at its closest point, about 140 times farther away than the moon. Accounting for the orbital mechanics that govern when Earth and Mars align for efficient travel, a round trip takes roughly 2 to 3 years. You cannot abort a Mars mission the way you can abort a lunar mission. If something goes wrong 2 months out from Mars, you cannot simply turn around and come home. The physics do not allow it. You are committed, which means every system, every piece of life support, every component of the vehicle has to work reliably for years in the most hostile environment humans have ever attempted to operate in. Building that capability does not cost what Apollo cost. It costs more, significantly more. And for the last several years, SpaceX has been burning through development funding at a rate that would be alarming if the goal were anything less than colonizing another planet. There is a number that did not make the headlines when SpaceX filed its public prospectus. In 2025 alone, SpaceX spent approximately $15 billion in capital expenditures. That is not revenue. That is not operating costs. That is money spent building things. Starship development, launch infrastructure, manufacturing capacity. $15 billion in a single year. And the company was still reporting a net loss because the ambition is running faster than the revenue. This is the context in which $75 billion matters. It is not wealth. It is not profit. It is runway. It is the ability to keep spending $15 billion a year for 5 more years without having to stop and ask anyone for permission. In aerospace development, the ability to maintain momentum without interruption is one of the most valuable things that exists. Programs that lose funding get canceled. Programs that maintain funding get completed. The history of space exploration is largely a history of which programs managed to survive the political and financial cycles that killed everything around them. SpaceX just bought itself a significant amount of immunity to that problem. But here is where the story gets more complicated and more interesting. SpaceX's actual prospectus, the document they filed with the SEC laying out how they intend to use the money, contains something that is both honest and slightly frustrating. The company states that it intends to use the proceeds to fund its growth strategy, including expansion of AI computing infrastructure, enhancements to launch infrastructure and launch vehicles, and increases in the scale of satellite constellations. Mars is mentioned, as it always is with SpaceX. But the specific, near-term priorities in the document are infrastructure and AI, not a crude Mars landing. This is not a betrayal of the mission. It is how the mission actually works. Starship is the vehicle that gets humans to Mars. Without Starship working reliably, at scale, carrying significant payloads, there is no Mars program. And Starship is not finished. It is flying, which is remarkable given where it was 3 years ago. But flying and operational are very different things. The vehicle has completed multiple successful test flights, demonstrated the ability to return its super heavy booster to the launch site, and is approaching the point where it can carry a meaningful payload to orbit. But between where Starship is today and where it needs to be to carry humans safely to Mars, there is still an enormous amount of engineering left to do. That engineering costs money. The $75 billion pays for it. Think about it this way. Every successful Starship test flight that happens in the next 3 years is in part being funded by the capital raised in June 2026. Every failure that gets analyzed and corrected, every iteration that improves the vehicle's reliability, every manufacturing process that gets refined to bring down the cost per flight, all of it traces back to the financial runway this IPO created. You cannot see the connection directly when you watch a rocket launch. But it is there. There is a person whose story matters here. And it tells you something important about the kind of bet SpaceX is making. Elon Musk has said publicly, more than once, that he founded SpaceX not because he thought it would succeed, but because he believed something had to try. In 2002, the commercial space industry barely existed. The idea that a private company could develop orbital rockets was considered faintly absurd by most of the aerospace establishment. The idea that the same company would eventually attempt to colonize Mars was not even a conversation that serious people were having. Musk gave himself 10 years and enough personal capital to fund 3 launches. The first 3 Falcon 1 rockets all failed. The company came within 1 failed launch of bankruptcy. The 4th launch, in September 2008, succeeded. SpaceX survived. And the lesson Musk took from that experience was not about resilience or optimism. It was about iteration. You build it fails. You learn, you rebuild, you keep going until it works. That philosophy, applied to a Mars transportation system, is what Starship represents. And it is what the $75 billion is funding. Now let's talk about what the Mars timeline actually looks like from here. SpaceX has not publicly announced a crewed Mars landing date in the way NASA announces mission timelines. What Musk has said, in various interviews and presentations over the years, is that he believes the first uncrewed Starship missions to Mars could happen as early as the late 2020s, with crewed missions potentially following in the early 2030s. These timelines have always been optimistic. SpaceX timelines are famously optimistic, but they are also directionally accurate in a way that skeptics consistently underestimate. The pattern with SpaceX is not that they hit their dates. The pattern is that they hit their goals, just later than announced. Falcon 9 reusability was considered impossible. Then it was demonstrated years after the original target. Starship's first orbital flight was delayed repeatedly. Then it happened. The specific dates are wrong. The destination is not. With $75 billion in new capital, the question is not whether the Mars timeline accelerates. It almost certainly does. The question is by how much. The most honest answer, probably not as dramatically as the headlines suggest, and more significantly than the skeptics will admit. The bottleneck for Mars is not primarily money. It never has been past a certain threshold. The bottleneck is physics and engineering. You cannot accelerate the development of life support systems beyond what the testing process allows. You cannot rush the iterative failures that teach you how a vehicle behaves in conditions you cannot fully simulate on Earth. You cannot compress the orbital mechanics that determine when Earth and Mars are positioned for efficient transit. Those windows open roughly every 26 months regardless of how much capital you have. What money does is remove the stops. It removes the moments where progress slows because a team is waiting for funding approval. It removes the decisions where you choose the cheaper option because the better option is not in the budget. It removes the gap between having an idea that would improve the vehicle and being able to test that idea. In aerospace development, those stops are not minor inconveniences. They are the difference between a program that reaches its goal in 10 years and one that reaches it in 2075. $1 billion removes a lot of stops. There is one more dimension to this that almost nobody in the financial coverage has mentioned, and it matters enormously for the actual science of getting to Mars. SpaceX's prospectus included details about its AI infrastructure ambitions, including a project called Colossus, a network of orbital data centers that would operate in space. This sounds at first like a completely separate business from Mars colonization. It is not. The computational infrastructure required to plan, execute, and troubleshoot a crewed Mars mission is extraordinary. Real-time trajectory analysis, life support monitoring, Autonomous decision-making for scenarios where communication delays of up to 24 minutes each way make human-in-the-loop responses impossible. All of this requires computing capacity that does not yet exist in the form Mars operations will need. The AI infrastructure SpaceX is building with IPO proceeds is, in part, the nervous system that a Mars mission will eventually run on. The connection is not obvious from a financial filing, but it is real. Step back for a moment and think about what this moment actually represents. For most of human history, the idea of permanently leaving this planet was mythology, a dream that belonged to science fiction and the speeches of visionaries who were tolerated but not taken seriously. The first time a human left Earth's atmosphere was 65 years ago. The first time humans set foot on another world was 57 years ago. And in the 5 decades since Apollo 17 lifted off from the lunar surface in December 1972, no human being has traveled beyond low Earth orbit. That is about to change. Not because of optimism, not because of inspiration, because the engineering is progressing. The vehicle exists and is being refined. And now the capital is there in a quantity that makes the program difficult to stop. Here is where the calculation actually stands. SpaceX has a vehicle, Starship, designed from the ground up for Mars. It has the launch infrastructure being built to support high-frequency Starship operations. It has the orbital mechanics expertise from years of deep space missions. It has the life support research that has been ongoing through its partnership with NASA's Artemis program. And now it has $75 billion in fresh capital on top of the revenue it was already generating from Falcon 9 and Starlink. What it does not have yet, a human-rated Starship that has completed crewed missions, a surface infrastructure on Mars capable of supporting human life, a supply chain for the consumables a permanent Mars presence would require, or a solution to the radiation exposure problem that makes the 8-month transit to Mars genuinely dangerous for human health over repeated trips. Those are real problems. They are not unsolvable problems. They are the kind of problems that $75 billion in development capital applied consistently over the next decade is designed to address. $75 billion did not just change SpaceX's financial position on June 12, 2026. It changed the probability that humans will stand on the surface of Mars within the next 15 years. Not from impossible to possible. SpaceX already made it possible. From possible to likely. For thousands of years, Mars was a red dot in the night sky. A wandering star that ancient astronomers tracked and named but could not reach. We sent our first successful lander there in 1976. We have been studying it with robots ever since. We know what its soil is made of. We know how thin its atmosphere is. We know where its water ice is stored. We have mapped it more thoroughly than most of Earth was mapped 500 years ago. We know everything about Mars except what it feels like to stand on it. That gap between knowing and standing, between understanding a world from 140 million miles away and actually being there, is what SpaceX is trying to close. And $75 billion just made the closing date a little less uncertain. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe and support us by hitting the like button.